pleased to be able to introduce Umar Saif, today's distinguished lecturer. Umar is Vice Chancellor at ITU in Pakistan. He's also chair of the Punjab IT Board. That Umar got his PhD from University of Cambridge, working in operating systems. He did a postdoc at Cambridge, at MIT on the Oxygen Project, moved back to Pakistan as a faculty member at LUMS, one of the premier institutes in Pakistan as a computer scientist. He's done leading work in operating systems and helping found the field of ICTD. Umar has also been very, very successful in spinning off a range of companies in Pakistan. That Umar has then taken a path of joining the public sector, and what Umar is talking about today is the tremendous impact that technology projects can have if they are taken to scale through the public sector. So please welcome Umar and look forward.
Well, I was told this lecture hall is very steep and it'll be intimidating. I didn't realize that's how intimidating it will be, but it is. I hope you can hear me all the way in the back. I see old friends. Very good. Well, this talk has two parts to this. The first part is talking about some of the work that we did in the university, ITU in this case, and scaled it up as part of my government job at a scale that we did not anticipate when we started doing this, but this actually is quite a bit of scale and has been able to transform several things in the government, and I have 3 case studies for you. The second part of this talk is this new platform that we're developing that sort of is aimed at making it easy for people to do large impact surveys, large impact assessments or surveys to collect data, especially in the developing world where it's very difficult to collect data. I call it Uber for surveys. So that's the second part of this talk. So let's start out with the first one. This really just 3 case studies rather than lecturing on how to design technology for the developing world. I thought it is much more effective to leave you with 3 tangible case studies on how we started out solving a problem and then scaling it at a scale where it started to impact real lives in Pakistan. Pakistan is a large country. It's the 6th largest in the world by population. And in all the work, there are some recurring themes. The first one is that we've always used the smartphone, a cheap smartphone, as our platform of choice for all the technology that we've designed. The evidence or data that we generate using these smartphones has now begun to influence policy, decision-making, budgetary decisions in the government. We take good advantage of the GPS embedded in the device as well as the camera. So most of the evidence that we collect is geotagged with some pictorial evidence. We've begun to use satellite imagery in interesting, clever ways to analyze the impact of our work. And we've just recently also made friends with folks that do what is now called deep learning or do some speech analysis and image processing to do various things. And I'll give you examples of that also. So let me start out with the first story. The first case study is about a dengue epidemic that we had in Pakistan. I work in the province of Punjab, and Punjab has about 120 million population, so it's also a very large place. And in 2011, over a period of 3 months, we had 23,000 dengue patients. Now that had never happened in Pakistan before. We were not prepared for this, and therefore in that pandemic, about 300 odd people died. And these are government numbers, so these could be conservative also. So real numbers could even be larger than this. And when this epidemic happened, there were 3 key questions that were asked of us as technology folks working in the government. The first question was, where is the outbreak? And that's a very profound question in the developing world because there is no sense of a unique identifier for a place. There is no zip code equivalent in the developing world. It's not unique to Pakistan. It extends beyond Pakistan also. So there are no unique names for places. So just pointing someone to a place which has an outbreak is non-trivial. So that was question number 1. Question number 2 was, are we doing enough to contain the epidemic from getting any worse? And question number 3 was, can you throw some magic at this and possibly predict where the next outbreak is going to be, so we can mobilize resources and maybe try and contain it from getting worse. So we started our development. This was the first application that we developed for smartphones. And because there was no unique IDs, no zip codes, we chose to just work with the GPS coordinates that a phone would return. And we distributed about 7,000 of these. We used 7,000 frontline health workers, dengue prevention workers, who were given these smartphones. This guy costs about $80. Pakistan is right next to China, so cheap smartphones are really cheap. And this is a good device, made by a Chinese company, runs Android, has good camera on it and GPS. And we built our first application. The application was, and I'm asked to use this pointer, which works on the screen. The application is very iconic in the sense that you could use it even if you weren't very literate. And you would choose the activity that you want to report as prevention activity that you were doing, and take a picture of the work that you're doing and submit it to our platform. In fact, we started getting 3 different data streams, and I'll talk more about this in just a little bit. The first one was, the first question, remember, was where is the outbreak? And because we didn't have unique identifiers for locations, we asked these frontline workers to go and geotag the houses of the confirmed patients. So you would take this device along and would geotag the house of the confirmed patient so that we know where the patients are coming from. The second data stream that we were interested in is for them to geotag the containment work. And in that case, we wanted them to take pictures of the work that they were doing, largely 2 pictures, before they started their work and after they'd completed their work. This work involved removal of debris, getting rid of water ponds, shredding of tires, doing chemical sprays, fog sprays, anything that helps you contain the dengue epidemic. So they were taking pictures before and after the work that they'd done. And these were geotagged pictures, so we knew where the work was being done. And 3, we wanted them to geotag also the presence of the Aedes aegypti larva. This is the larva that can carry a dengue infection, and just being able to find out where this larva is turns out is a good signal to also be able to predict where the patients are going to come through subsequently. In the first week, we got about 100 activities from all over Lahore, but that's expected. These people had never used phones in this way before, and now we asked them to do the prevention work as well as send us pictures. But in the first week, we got about 100 pictures. In the second month, we got 1,500 pictures, and in March 2016, we got 81,000 geotagged pictures of prevention work. Each one of these mosquito signs is a picture of the prevention work. So this is scaled, and there's a huge uptake of this within the government. In fact, this is scaled to a point that I think we have now close to about 16 million geotagged activities. I have the real numbers in a slide in just a bit. But this is what this is how the technology was. They started using this technology and just started sending us pictures of the prevention work that they were doing. This is what that data looked like. So for instance, whenever a patient registers in a healthcare facility, in a hospital, private facilities are asked not to treat dengue patients. They're always sent to public sector facilities. Whenever a patient logs into a public sector facility, a frontline health worker goes to their house to do what is called an IRS spray, an indoor residual spray. That's a draconian spray, kills any semblance of a mosquito in that house so that other people do not contract dengue. So this is one such worker who's doing an indoor spray in a house of a dengue patient. The protocol is that they must spray not just the house of the patient, but also 48 adjoining houses so that the disease doesn't spread to the neighborhood. And here's the kind of data that we get. As soon as we get a patient, this is the visualization that we get. They must do spray in all 48 houses, and if they do or don't, it sort of becomes obvious through this visualization also. This is the kind of information that we get, which is the patient ID against which the IRS worker was mobilized, the department that's doing this work, in this case the City District Government Lahore, the name of the guy or the login ID, the activity, which is the indoor residual spray, the time and date.
I'm just curious, there's a very sharp edge around that data on the right. Is that political, geographical?
This right here?
Yeah.
Well, so I wouldn't read too much into this data. This is a snapshot of a small set. I'll show you the actual picture of the city after what it looks like.
That was my question.
Sorry? Yeah, I missed that question, but we'll come back to that in just a bit. So this is what the city actually looks like. Right? So there isn't much that we've left in terms of prevention work. We have more than 16 million activities that have been performed and geotagged and submitted through these smartphones now. Actually, on any single day, our record is 81,000 activities that have been submitted by 7,000 frontline health workers. This is used by all 36 districts in Punjab, which is smaller administrative units within Punjab, and across 25 government departments. This is health and public health and city district governments and solid waste management companies and so on. So for the 25 different companies that participate in this. This is the kind of analysis that we do with this data. So when the prevention activities are being reported, in this case, this prevention activity is indoor surveillance. In months leading up to the period, which is conducive for large dengue outbreaks, it's important that in the months prior to that, the public health workers go to these houses door to door and find any open containers of water and get rid of the Aedes aegypti larvae. This is called indoor surveillance. So this is indoor surveillance throughout the city. We overlay a Manhattan grid on top of the city just to be able to analyze which are the communities or areas that are underserved, right? And we highlight that and then send them back to these health workers to alert them that there are some houses within the city that they may be ignoring. The second analysis that we do is again on the data that I just explained, that we ask them to geotag the houses of the confirmed patients, which is these circles right here. This is a 1 kilometer radius around the house of a confirmed patient. 1 kilometer is significant. It's the typical flight radius of a dengue mosquito. And the red pins that you see here, I hope they're visible to you, are positive Aedes aegypti larva reports. This is typically done by entomologists. We have about, I think, a couple of hundred entomologists going around the city with these smartphones, and they can visually recognize an Aedes aegypti larva. Looks slightly bigger, docks itself slightly in a different place in a water container. Once they find this larva, which could be infected with the dengue infection, they take a picture of that and also geotag it. Just by looking at this picture, the two things will jump at you. One, wherever you see more red pins, you'll also see more circles, which means that the presence of the larva is a good indicator, good signal for patients coming through subsequently. And whenever you see one circle, you see a cluster of circles around it, which means that if there's a dengue mosquito in a neighborhood, it's going to infect more than one person. Armed with this knowledge, we then feed it to an early epidemic warning system, which was the third question. Is there any way we can forecast before an outbreak happens, where the outbreak is going to happen? And we do this using SAT-SCAN. Has anyone heard of SAT-SCAN in this audience? One person who implemented the algorithm for me. He wrote up the SAT-SCAN algorithm, and he's now a grad student here. But this is out of Harvard. This is a sort of a statistical temporal, it's a spatial temporal statistical scanner, which basically means that it does, think of this as a map that's covered with lots of invisible little cylinders, each one filling up with either patient reports or larva reports. And if any one of these cylinders starts filling up a little too quickly, it will flag that as an outbreak. And if two cylinders right next to each other start filling up quickly, then it'll make a bigger cylinder out of that. This doesn't need to be parameterized or keyed in with location. It just works with GPS coordinates and would automatically tell you both the extent as well as the intensity of the outbreak. In fact, SAT-SCAN, which we've trained over time, and this is sort of real alerts going off at different places in the city, SAT-SCAN gives you about 2 to 3 weeks of heads up before an outbreak peaks out. So as soon as something starts developing into outbreak in terms of too many larva reports coming through or too many patient reports coming through, it will flag that as a potential outbreak so that you can mobilize your resources and see what could be contributing to that outbreak before it gets any worse. We beat this model against also a machine learning platform that we've trained over time against climate parameters. The three most important ones for dengue are rainfall, temperature, and humidity. So whenever this platform generates an outbreak, this is beat up against this, this other engine which takes temperature, rainfall, humidity, and will tell you whether the season is conducive to a dengue outbreak. So this gives you statistical analysis and then the machine learning model tells you whether the weather is conducive for the outbreak or not, and if it is not, the alert is not generated. So this is what we've implemented, and this is sort of our early epidemic warning system. I don't have a slide on the other system, but I want to quickly tell you another piece of work that we've done on top of that. When the dengue epidemic happened, we also, in panic almost, set up a helpline, like a hotline for citizens to call, a telephone triage line, which they could call. This was manned by doctors. So citizens would call with symptoms, wanting to find out if what they have could be dengue, right? And this was just set up largely so that we can help our citizens, give them information. But over time, and this has gone on for 3 years now, over time, about 300,000 phone calls were made on this helpline, which we set up and widely publicized. On the side and independently, we were collecting this data about dengue patients, about their location, their frequency, and their place. So we were getting, this data stream separately, and we were getting these phone calls. And with a collaborator in NYU, Lakshmi Subramanian, some of you might know him. He's a networking guy, also does ICTD work. He looked at these data sets with us and said, hey, it'll be great if you could build a model where changes in call volume patterns could be a good signal for a potential outbreak. People call more often if there's an outbreak in the city. Google Flu Trends folks did that for flu trends. They isolated Google queries. People look for symptoms of flu or medicine for flu, etc., if they think they're flu. So they've isolated about 21 different queries at Google and be able to and use those queries, changes in volumes of these queries, to be able to predict if there's a flu outbreak. You could do the same with a phone line. It works a lot like Google in this case. And we've isolated the queries that had to do with dengue symptoms, and just by analyzing changes in call volume patterns, we could 3 weeks in advance predict, actually forecast in this case, the number of patients that are going to come through subsequently for dengue. Right? And we just published that in Science Advances. I never thought I'll publish in those kind of journals. It got quite popular, and NPR did a story, NYT did a story. I just got off an interview actually a couple of hours ago about that piece of work. The good thing about that, this other model that we built, is that the model is now built. It's actually quite simple for someone in the development sector to go to another country, just set up a helpline for Zika or for dengue, and just use the same model to be able to forecast the number of patients coming through. The second case study that I have for you is in a different domain altogether, which is education. Now, in Government of Punjab, as I've told you, it's a large government. We were interested in finding out if the schools in Punjab, public sector schools in Punjab, are doing as well as we think they are, which means whether teachers are showing up to classrooms, students are enrolled and indeed showing up, whether they're furniture, running tap water, electricity, and so on, and cleanliness. So to be able to do that, and this is the scale of the problem is as follows. We have 53,000 schools in Punjab. About 10 million students go to these schools, and we employ 338,000 teachers. So to measure this, we employed about 1,100 inspectors, monitoring assistants, and asked them to go to these schools once a month with these paper-based forms and report on important data. Things like, did they find any students in the classroom? Was the head teacher there? Were the school teachers there? Was the school clean, et cetera, et cetera? And they would go to these schools, these 1,143 inspectors, collect this information on these paper-based forms, and this information would then be given to their line managers and their line managers and so on and so forth, and would be tabulated, in various Excel sheets, and finally would arrive, for provincial government to look at this data. And then this data would be presented to the chief minister, who is the chief executive of the province, every 3 months in what is called a stock take. Actually, there's a stock take tomorrow, which I joined at midnight tonight from Seattle. So every 3 months, he would look at this data, and based on this, would make important decisions on who could stay in his job and who needs to be transferred out or punished, and so on and so forth. So this became an important data set. Except that once you look at this data set carefully and this data collection regime, it has many shortcomings built into it. The first one being that the inspectors who are going to these schools would collude easily with the head teacher, and in fact choose not to go to the school, but call their school teacher and say, fill up this form, a tedious long 40-minute form for me, and drop this form off to my place so that I can submit it to my line manager. Two, at this scale, the scale of Punjab, it would take us about, in this case, 3 months to collect this data, where the data was these paper-based forms 53,000 53,000 forms would be collected across the province, and then would be tabulated and summarized and so on. And at times this data was ready only a night before the Chief Minister's review, which is sort of common in government. And that introduces an interesting routing problem for policy folks here, where you've collected data about teacher absenteeism in schools and routed it directly to the Chief Minister. The Chief Minister looks at this data every 3 months and says, fire the commissioner, because that's what the Chief Minister is going to do. Except that you need to talk to the headmaster of the school to fix that problem, right? So if you're collecting the data just, which is sort of just ready to be presented all the way to the Chief Minister, then it introduces, interesting policy failures within the way this data is analyzed. 3, as this data sort of bubbled up this reporting chain from the monitoring evaluation assistant to the district monitoring officer, to the district coordination officer, to the executive district officer, to the school education department, eventually we had actually outsourced the process of data analysis to McKinsey. Along this process, what we found is that everyone was rounding up the data. No one wanted to look bad across this reporting chain. No one wants to say, my school is not working out well. Right? It is in everyone's interest to politely round up the data, right? So as the data got reported across this chain, there was systematic fudging of the data happening. So we addressed all of this by equipping the monitoring and evaluation systems with tablets, not with smartphones. A tablet gives you a little more real estate. Gave them tablets and said, you go to the schools now and fill up these forms on these tablets. And when you go there, and submit the form from the school itself, we will only entertain the form if it was uploaded from the vicinity of the school, because the GPS is built into the device. This way, we'll ensure that you're in fact going to the school, that the data is real time. The rest of it is processed automatically through this platform. No one can fudge the data along the route while it's being processed and all these scores are being computed. And 3, as soon as we figure out that the school teacher is not showing up or there are not enough students present in the school, the correction mechanism also kicks in straight away. We don't wait for the Chief Minister to look at this data every 3 months. And finally, and what's most exciting for me, was that we also chose to make this data public. So if you go to open.punjab.gov.pk, you would actually see this. And if you clicked on this, at any point in time, you could in real time see the performance of schools in Punjab. Now, this is a bold thing for a political government to do, right? In fact, let me see if I can give you a quick demo. Yeah, here you go. So if you go to open.punjab.gov.pk, you would come across this. And if you clicked on this, this is what it would open. I've preloaded the screen. This is the map of Punjab, and this is student attendance across Punjab. The ones in solid greens are on target. The ones in light green are behind target, and one in yellow are not doing well at all. So let's say that we click on then this yellow, which is a district that doesn't seem to be doing well, and it will pull up all the tehsils, which is a smaller administrative unit within a district with student attendance ratio. So let's say here's a tehsil that's pulling this score down for the entire district. So we click on that. And what you would see now is a list of all the schools in the province, the unique ID of the school, the name of the school, whether the visit has happened or not, the date and time, and how many students were present when the visit happened. This is actually an average of the last 3 months. And as I scroll down this list, you would also see schools that didn't have any student present when the inspector went there. So we are also capturing this data. The inspector went there. There was no one in that school. We're capturing this data, and we're actually making this public. At the political leadership level, there's actually no incentive to hide this data. They want to fix it. So as I click on, let's say, any one of these schools, what you see is the actual form that got filled up by the inspector, by the monitoring evaluation assistant, the budget of the school, the name of the school, the name of the headmaster, how many students were present, et cetera, and also, proof of his visit. This is a geotagged picture of the attendance register that he must take and upload from the vicinity of the school through his tablet. The picture of the head teacher. The head teacher wasn't present, so this is the picture of the head teacher. Okay. The selfie of the MEA in front of the school as evidence that he went there. So this is his selfie in front of the school. And then his visit proof, which is signatures on the attendance register. So this is the data that he had submitted. Now, in this, what we have ensured is that the inspector is actually going to the school. right? But what we cannot ensure still is that the inspector is being truthful. He can still go there and lie. He can still go there and say the school was clean, whereas the school wasn't clean. And the right way to address that problem is to involve the community. Once the government has collected this data, we certainly make this data public, but I want to actually reach out to the community, in this case, parents of children who are going to the school, and ask them if they agree with the data that's been reported by this inspector, right? So for that, we've built this mechanism in, which we call an alert mechanism. So in this platform, for this school, this is unique ID of the school, the name of the school, oops, what did I do? Name of the school, so you click on this, and you can come and put in your name, your contact number, and your email, and the information that you're interested in. And when this school is visited next by a government inspector, whatever data that they upload will be sent to you over an SMS alert and an email, right? Whatever you're interested in. When you get this information, you can come back to this platform and challenge this data. You can say, I don't agree with this data. The data that the inspector has just uploaded doesn't seem truthful. If you get enough challenges on this data, alerts go off within the government. We haven't seen huge uptake of this by parents, mostly to do with, I think, internet penetration in Pakistan. What we're doing now is force enrolling parents in this platform. I've collected their cell phone numbers. I'm putting them in this platform so that the next time the inspector goes there and uploads this data, SMS alerts go out to about 10% randomly selected parents to cross-verify the data from them. And they can dispute the data by just responding to that SMS. This has resulted in the following. What you've seen is three things. One, the enrollment numbers have become real across Punjab. We used to over-report these numbers, but with a better monitoring regime, the enrollment numbers, and because the attendance registers are now being looked at and pictures being taken, etc., have become real. This is with paper-based data collection. Remember, over 2 years, population has also grown, so this should have been the other way around, but enrollment numbers have come down and have become real. And after an interesting inflection point, the presence of the teachers is improved. And the attendance of the students has improved. And again, after an interesting inflection point. So those are the three outcomes that we've seen because of this better monitoring regime across schools. One final thing that we've done, and this is super exciting also, is that measurement of the outcomes of this entire monitoring exercise is essentially to ask whether the students are learning anything in the classroom or not. You can build all the classrooms and all these schools and keep them clean and get these teachers posted. If students are not getting anything, all of this doesn't make sense, right? But that is notoriously hard to measure. How do you measure student learning outcomes at such a large scale? In fact, governments do standardized testing only after every 5 years or 8 years or 10 years in Pakistan's case. So while these inspectors were going to these schools with these tablets, we asked them to also load up this application, which we call a quiz application. And the regime now is that when they go to the school and report on all this other data, they also fire up our quiz application and gather 10 children at random and ask them to answer these questions on the spot. It is fed through an automatic test generation software, which has about 3 million questions in an item bank. These questions are randomly assigned, 7 questions asked in every quiz across 3 subjects, and 10 students at random are collected, and they fire up this application and ask the students to answer this on the spot. We have conducted 17 million quizzes to date on this data collection regime, and about 11 million forms. This is what the data looks like while tests are being conducted. This is English grade 2, so this is picture recognition, sentence completion, simple arithmetic, etc., etc. And we get this data, and we can also compare this with our government input data, which is how well are they learning sentence construction or picture recognition and so on and so forth. So we are now beginning to measure in Punjab both government input data, which is budgets and cleanliness of the classrooms and teachers and students and so on, as well as the outcomes, which is student learning outcomes, through this tablet-based data collection regime. And again, 11 million geotagged forms have been collected through this platform, and about 17 million quizzes have been conducted, the 10 in any visit that are conducted through this platform. And this is good data for ICTD folks who would want to look at this and do research on top. We've actually been making all this data public, but also making it public in a way that's conducive for your analysis and research. So finally, I want to present a case study of the vaccination program in Pakistan. We are super proud of what we've accomplished here. Pakistan, unfortunately, is responsible for 85% of the world's polio cases. And that's because our main vaccination program, the extended program on immunization, broke down at some stage. Government of Punjab employs 3,750 mobile vaccinators whose job is to go from village to village, community to community, and vaccinate children. Right? When we started measuring their attendance in October 2014, we found out that only about 1/5 of them are in fact showing up for work. Only about 21% were showing up for work. And when we started measuring coverage of vaccination in Punjab, it was as low as 15%. This is October 2014. No wonder, there were so many polio cases and also vaccine preventable cases that were happening in the country. So we did the following. We gave them smartphones, all 3,750 vaccinators, and asked them to mark their attendance using these smartphones. And the way it would work is at the beginning of the week, we'll get the line manager of these vaccinators to print out an A3 size Google map. And on that Google map, he would identify targets for these vaccinators to go to, which would then be digitized and put into our platform. And we designed a very simple Foursquare-like application for these vaccinators to go check into these kit stations. These are places that the vaccinators need to go to, haul up children, and vaccinate them. Right? So, and this application, a Foursquare-like application, was very, very simple. All it required them to do was go and check into these kit stations and report how many children have they vaccinated in that kit station. Right? Just by being able to do that and then analyze their attendance, gray is when they're marking their attendance. Gray is when we are marking their present. Black is when they're not marking their attendance, and so on. And we asked them to go now check into all these kit stations. If they manage to check into all the kit stations that they were mandated to, we mark them as present. If they fail to check into any of the kit stations they were supposed to go to, we mark them as absent. And just by doing this very simple data collection regime, we improved their attendance from 21% in October 2014 to 91% in February 2015, in just 4 months, because they now knew someone's looking at them and they must go to these communities and check in. In fact, when we first designed this, and the reason we worked with a very simple Foursquare-like application is then when we asked them to start sharing information about vaccinations, they said, we can't give you information about individual vaccinations. We can go check into these kit stations, but we can't give you information about individual check-ins. And the reason we can't do that is because we vaccinate hundreds of children per day, and the really small real estate on the cell phone would prevent us from putting in all this information here, and we won't be able to do our work. You'll be slowing us down. So we backed off and said, all right, go check in and just tell us how many children you're vaccinating. After collecting data for 3 months, and that's the power of data, we realized that no vaccinator in Punjab is vaccinating more than 12 children per day. In fact, if they did that, they'll outgrow the population growth rate even in Pakistan. Right? There's 3,750 vaccinators. You do the math. So each one of them is vaccinating 12 children per day. Okay? So then we redesigned the application and said, why don't you now start sending us also information about individual vaccinations. So this is a child who's recently been vaccinated, not entirely thrilled about it. And this is all the information about the vaccination, where the vaccination was done. So while we did this, and I explained, the attendance of the vaccinators rose from 21% to 91%. But we then did another survey, and the survey we found out again that the coverage is still low. Even though the attendance has risen, the coverage was still low. Right? And we went back to the drawing board and to analyze what may have gone wrong. And that's when we realized that the vaccination manager, the vaccination in charge, is also not very efficient. When he's printing out these A3-paced Google Maps, he's routinely ignoring communities that need to be vaccinated. So while the vaccinators are going to all the places that they're supposed to go to, the vaccination manager who's supposed to identify these targets for them is routinely ignoring places that they must go to. Okay? So we wanted to automate that part also, and computer vision folks, GIS folks, came in handy. And they said, if you give us a Google map, we can do a simple texture-based analysis, text-on analysis, and train our models, and we can automatically detect housing clusters for you. Right? They all have certain geometry, their texture is different, and so on. The computer vision folks here would sympathize with this. And if you give it a Google satellite map, free Google satellite imagery, they'll automatically identify houses for you. So we take this, and then we abstract these housing clusters into a layer of polygons. Each polygon is a cluster of households. There are different size polygons here. because they're different density of houses, but each one has similar population. Okay, so we automatically we pipe through a Google satellite imagery through this machine learning platform. It will automatically identify houses for you. Then we make an abstraction layer of polygons on top of that, and then layer that on top of the city. And once we've done it, we'll then correlate that with the number of vaccination check-ins. These are vaccination check-ins. Any polygon that has sufficient number of vaccination check-ins stays green. The ones that don't get enough vaccinator check-ins go red. So these are communities that the vaccinators have now ignored. As soon as a polygon goes red, we start sending out SMS alerts and start writing government letters alerting the vaccinators that they've indeed ignored a community. When we started doing this kind of analysis, this is what happened. This is what Punjab looked like in October 2014. This is what Punjab looks like in May 2016. So from 18% coverage, we went up to 88% coverage. Right? The total turnaround of the vaccination program in Punjab. This is another visualization of the same. Initially, we had the attendance go up to 98%. This is vaccinators checking in from convenient places, but the coverage still stayed low. As we rolled out the satellite imaging analysis part, the attendance fell sharply because now they had to go to all these places to go and mark their attendance, while the coverage started to improve. And this is where we are today. The vaccination coverage as well as attendance has both improved. And for the first time in Pakistan, we've hit a critical 70% on all antigen penetration, which is important threshold for vaccinations to work. Otherwise, you'll find people in your social network to still spread disease. The final problem that we are still wrestling with, and the people in this audience who are wrestling with that more than I am, is Samia around here? Samia is still here. And she was the one who was wrestling with this problem. The big problem there was that even though we improved the coverage and the attendance, there was still a drop-off of children, which meant that because vaccination doesn't all happen on one day, in fact, it spans about 18 months, children would get a couple of vaccinations and then would fail to show up for subsequent doses. Okay, so you would not complete your entire course of vaccination. And because it happens over a 1.5 year time window. So to be able to do that, we did various things. One, we redesigned our vaccination cards. This is what vaccination cards in Punjab used to look like. Actually, I'm told this is how vaccination cards in US also look like. Okay, they're little pieces of paper, easy to lose, very cryptic for parents to see and understand which vaccination their child is due next. Okay, so we replaced that, and Samia tells me here, we replaced that with these redesigned passport-style booklets, which apparently is the gold standard for doing vaccination cards, color-coded, so you know which vaccination is important for which body part of your child, which organ of your child. It has a calendar up front, so it lays out for you which vaccinations are due and when. But more so, it has an invisible NFC embedded in this vaccination card, right? And the NFC is important because when the mother now takes this booklet to the vaccinator, she has to physically tap this vaccination card with the cell phone of the vaccinator, where they're both NFC enabled. It won't work from a distance. They have to physically tap this card. And because of physically tapping this card, the mom is always reminded that needs to hold on to this card, because this needs to be physically tapped with the vaccinator's phone before her child is vaccinated. So they hold on to this card. Okay. The other thing that we've started to do is to also collect numbers of the mom, cell phone numbers of the mom, as part of the vaccination of the child, so that they can be sent either robocalls, IVR calls, or SMS reminders about when their child is due for the vaccination. First, we started collecting data about the mothers. That worked out all right. But then we started collecting data about mothers-in-law, who are a bigger power broker in these households. And once they get an alert about their grandchild being due for the vaccination, they're more likely to bring them to the vaccinator. But that's what we're working on now. This is happening in 4 districts as a pilot. Samia is the main champion for this before she came here to start grad school. And that work is still going on. And as soon as we have proved that this model of an NFC-enabled redesigned vaccination card and the reminders to the mother-in-laws is working out well, we'll scale it throughout the province also. So that handles both all 3 aspects of this: the coverage, the attendance to vaccinators, as well as the dropout that we want to now address. Finally, and I'm conscious of time, 5 more minutes, about this new platform that we're building. In all the work that we do, one problem that I come up against repeatedly is how to do impact assessment of the work that we are doing, especially in that part of the world. How do you collect data points of 100,000 mother-in-laws, whether they want to get their grandchildren vaccinated or not? How do you do that? And therefore, most of the work in ICTD is confined to an RCT of 200 people or 300 people. That's great, but not representative of what needs to now happen at a bigger scale in that part of the world. So we started out designing what I call Uber for RCTs. Okay, and the way typically data collection or service works in that part of the world anywhere is a very tedious, and fault-prone process of you calling a survey company, getting them to come in and agree with you on a questionnaire that you want to now put out for survey, potentially with them identify survey targets that they need to go to, then randomize according to some rule of thumb heuristic for them to go out and collect this data, bring it back to you for you to tabulate, compile, analyze, just to realize that you missed out an important factor in randomization, and then they go out and do the survey again. This really is an expensive, tedious, fault-prone process. Okay, so what we wanted to do was design a marketplace for surveys, where citizens in the developing world, but here also, could sign up to become your enumerators. So the idea is that I want to collect data in Africa. I can, on this marketplace, just as you would on Amazon Mechanical Turk, go and float this job and say, I want this data collected from the following households. Right? And people have this application installed on their phones, and they get all these survey data collection requests showing up on this application, and they can sign up on any one of these jobs if they like, and go and collect data for you. And through M-Pesa, EasyPesa, through any mobile money transfer, get paid a couple of dollars to do data collection for you. The question then is the data being collected, because it's not being done not by trained enumerators. One would want to ideally think that the ones that are currently collecting data are trained enumerators. But because these are not trained enumerators, how do you make sure that the data that you collect is of sufficiently high quality? Right? So for that, in this platform, we're doing two things. One, we talk to, again, machine learning folks and ask them to automatically identify data targets for us, rather than relying on these untrained enumerators, or relying on researchers or the understanding of the survey company on where they need to go and collect data. These days, you could feed the computer vision guys in this room a satellite imagery, and they can detect for you houses that look like houses of people below a certain poverty threshold, houses that have a tin roof, houses that don't have electricity at night, houses that are close to a park, houses that are close to a hospital, houses that are close to a school, houses that are accessible by a large road. So they can automatically identify those houses for you, and that's indeed what we do. These guys now continue to make plugins for us for this platform. We give it Google Satellite Imagery like this. It will detect houses for you. It will detect houses for you, and then once you've detected the houses, you then detect the houses that are close to parks. So you've detected the houses. Next step, you find houses that are near schools, in this case, houses that are near schools. And then you randomize. You say, I want to collect data through a random walk or an even distribution or whatever. You can algorithmically code the randomization into this platform. So that's another plugin. So you've now you've randomly assigned enumerators tasks to go and survey, and they go out and collect data for you. Right? So you've automatically identified survey targets for them. Right? You've randomized according to the platform. The platform will automatically randomize for you, and then you float this job just as you would on Amazon Mechanical Turk or eBay or whatever, and these folks would sign up and go and collect data for you. And this is what you start looking at. This is different enumerators going out and collecting data for you. Different enumerators going out and collecting data for you. You can rate them. You can look at it and so on and so forth. But more so, when they go and do this survey, this is again data coming back. When they go and collect this data, the final piece of technology here, which is critical, is that we ask them to also audio record the survey. When they conduct the survey, we ask them to audio record the survey as part of the same mobile application. And we put this survey, audio recorded survey, through speech processing plugins. And these speech processing guys have come along far enough to be able to look at this speech and automatically rate this survey. Even if they can't do open-ended speech recognition, they can do sentiment analysis. They can tell you how long someone waited to respond to a question. They can tell you whether the answer was detailed enough or flip. They can tell you whether the keywords used by the guy who got surveyed are the same that the enumerator is transcribing in his form. right? And so on and so forth, whether the interview was interstate or agitated, you can classify the gender, and so on and so forth. These speech guys, over time, even in language agnostic ways, could do a fair bit with processing the speech that comes back. So several technology plugins here. The first one that automatically analyzes satellite imagery and identify targets for you to go collect data. The second one that lets you randomize these data points. The third one that lets you post as a job on this marketplace. And the fourth one that lets you analyze the recorded speech surveys to automatically try and rate them. And you can make it such that the ones that don't follow, that don't come up to a certain standard in terms of speech processing plugins could then be discarded or automatically reassigned to other enumerators. So you can take away a lot of tedium of therefore collecting this data. Think of this as an Uber for service. Just as people would drive you from place to the other on Uber, here people are willing to go out and collect data for you, and you have enough technology at play to be able to automatically try and rate as much of these surveys as possible. So this is not just a marketplace for researchers and enumerators, it's also a marketplace for vision folks, computer vision folks who contribute technology to ICTD world by letting us automatically analyze, and figure out survey targets. For speech folks to process our audio recorded surveys so that they can be rated better. For algorithmic folks to do better randomization for us and so on and so forth. This is a platform that we've just built. I'm going to be bold and see if I can show you a live demo of this. So I've just logged in and I've said detect houses. Oh, very good. So this has detected all the houses in a community, and very good. And now I can say, show me only those houses that really look like houses, okay? So I've set a threshold of 50% on this algorithm, and I want to say houses that are near schools, okay? Houses that are near schools. Houses near schools. And I want to move on and randomize. And I want to say, let's say where uniform distribution and randomize. Oops, just a sec. It needs to know how many data points I want to collect. So let's say 400. So it says randomize. There you go. So randomized data points. And then I post the survey. And I can design the form of the survey and get the data collected. For the forms that are already uploaded and jobs that are alive, and this is currently being tested for a couple of things that we're doing, this is the kind of information that you start getting. Here's a survey that's been submitted by someone. I can see where the survey was done. Here you go. This is where the survey was done. I can click on the survey. With some effort, I can click on the survey. Maybe not. Okay, click on the, yeah. I can click on the survey. And hopefully, maybe not. So I can click on the survey, see the results for the survey, and also listen to the audio if I needed to. Sorry, this resolution is a little jumbled up. I can also make it such that surveys that our speech processing engine doesn't rate very well are automatically discarded or reassigned to enumerators. So that's how this platform works. We're currently testing this out. This is also an opportunity, for vision folks and speech folks to start contributing plugins to this open source platform. We're going to make this public for everyone to use in a couple of months once it's stabilized and is doing all the right things, and have enough plugins to be able to find houses that don't have electricity and near schools and near colleges and so on and so forth, and also good speech processing plugins. That's what I had for you. And I'm open to questions now.
So questions? So I'll start with one question, Umar. So I'm wondering what the main challenges were in doing projects distributing 5,000, 10,000 smartphones, since here we tend to think of projects distributing 5 smartphones, 10 smartphones.
Well, so one, the technology has to work all the time, so it can't be grad student quality code, no offense. But this is something that must work all the time, right? If it doesn't work, 1% of the times, no one's going to use it. Two, training is important, so on and so forth. But I guess because this device has some social value embedded in it, You can use it to call your friends and family. Your children can play games on it. This has a lot more chance of getting used as opposed to a laptop that we used to give to our civil servants to use, right? So I think just that this device is nice. It has an always-on internet connection. It is battery powered, so the electricity shortage doesn't affect this device. And because good cell phone coverage in Pakistan, this actually is a good platform to work with. So beyond this, I think so we are always sure to load this up with enough calling minutes and SMSs, so you can call it, so you can use the device socially. We don't lock the device. We let you install games that your children may want to play. And so that you keep it in your pocket and take care of this device. And we always design interfaces that low literate people can use for areas that don't have connectivity. The applications are such that you can store data locally and sync whenever you have connectivity. We experimented with ODK, which is from here, a great platform that lets us prototype very quickly and try some of these ideas out. But beyond this, we haven't really hit any showstoppers. There are always roadblocks and the little hurdles that we have to cross. But every time we have attempted a project like this, we've been able to scale it successfully. But the big challenge is for the government to use this data and do something about it. That, I think, is sort of the biggest challenge that I grapple with this at this point. That's not just government's unwillingness to use this data, but to use this data and convert it into actionable intelligence. At times, just an SMS-scaled message, right? SMS-sized message that gives people enough actionable intelligence to do something about it. So I think that also is a non-trivial part. Sorry.
Looking at what you've been able to accomplish, it's actually been really impressive. And I keep thinking, I can't even imagine people accepting some of these this transparency and openness even in the US. So I was wondering, has there been any pushback from people on a political or a social level to technology-enabled transparency? And how did you all overcome that?
So your question is, this transparency, this evidence-based decision-making, is not always welcome by governments and by politicians and bureaucrats. I think that's true. But in my case, the boss that I work with, the chief minister of the province, is very open to use of technology, is very open to evidence-based decision-making. In fact, he's got into these routines, which you call stock takes, influenced by some McKinsey deliverology work, where he sits down every couple of months with everyone who's an important stakeholder in a sector, education, health, law and order, municipality services, and confronts them with data. So I think there is sort of, if the politicians buy into your data and the power of data to confront the bureaucracy about how well they are doing or not, I think that's an important buy-in that you want, which then leaves you with an interesting problem that you don't want to be always fighting with the bureaucracy because they eventually prevail. So I think that relationship management needs to be done very carefully. And I think over time we've learned to work with them, understand them, try and correct things before it adversely affects their job and so on and so forth. But I've actually found that in this day and age, most politicians would want everything influenced by good data, by good evidence. They want to perform, they want to look good in front of their people, and if technology enables them to do it, then I think that you'll find them as supporters in interventions like these.
Different version of the same question. Something I also have to answer all the time. I'm not a skeptic, but most of the skeptics worry about privacy and misuse of data. How do you respond to those questions? How do you convince people that this will not be misused ever? What precautions, what techniques do you use to convince them?
So your question is about the privacy of the data, and I think that's a great question. And in every domain, that means something else, right? So, for instance, if you're using call data records to estimate someone's willingness to pay back a loan, it has different implications. If we are using vaccination data about who's trying to get their children immunized, that has different implications. So you have to be respectful of privacy. So, for instance, in our case, here's an interesting anecdote. It doesn't quite answer your question, but it's an interesting anecdote to tell. When we wanted to track children uniquely for vaccination purposes, the standard way to do it is to take a footprint of the child, right? The footprint of the child. You can't do that digitally unless you take flatbed scanners to vaccination points. And the biometrics evolve over time, right? So that's not a good identifier. And their faces also change. right, over this 1.5 year period. But what our computer vision folks keep telling us is that even if the child starts to look different over this time, the resemblance with the parents doesn't change. So if you can abstract away the face as a geometry that has some resemblance with two other geometries, the two parents, and just work with that abstraction, that's a good way to uniquely identify children and track their progress. So privacy, therefore, in this context, I'm willing to live with an abstraction, a scalar, that just measures the resemblance with the parent. That's good enough for me. Picture doesn't count, right? So you could protect the privacy that way. For call data records, you could anonymize a lot of them and still be able to tell whether there's a debilitating disease that someone's contracted and has reduced their mobility. Without knowing which person it is, just knowing that this disease is spreading in this union council, this zip code or whatever is good enough. So you could work with anonymizations, abstractions, and sort of one-way transforms of data that doesn't let you sort of track back to a form that would infringe privacy. So, but in each domain, you have to think about this carefully.
What's the perceived return on investment from the government actors? Are they putting more money into it? Do they see the value, or are they just letting you play at some level?
Both. I think just being able to develop cool stuff is very liberating and exciting. And because I do two things at the same time, I run a university and also run this IT department. In the university, we get to play with sort of things like the one that I've explained, and that's very important. Very, very important to have this flexible environment where you can do R&D and fail and experiment and so on and so forth. But I think once we do the scale up and we finally figure something out is the point when we do the scale up, we've always been able to show returns. And on these things, for a country that's responsible for 85% of the world's polio cases, when you're immigrating from a Pakistani airport, you're subjected to these polio drops regardless of who you are. So imagine the amount of money, logistic challenge, there needs to be a cold chain that you need to maintain for these polio vaccines, and so on and so forth. Imagine the amount of money that you save. Likewise, for vaccine preventable diseases, there are a lot of diseases that you wouldn't show up in hospitals if they were prevented through vaccine. So there's always an economic argument for this. And even if the dollars and pennies don't always match up, there's a political economy gain. There's a popularity gain, but there's also, this aspect of fixing a broken system. So I've never really faced any, in government you're always adjusting for funds, and that's a huge hassle, and various bureaucratic chains that you have to report to and vie for money. But I've never really come across a point where I can't demand more money for showing progress. So I think both forms, so government money with straitjacket audits, etc. later on for scale-ups, because we've been able to demonstrate some big, huge success there. But I don't want to undermine this, sort of experimental R&D money that's always been very critical to how we look at problems before we scale them up.
Why don't you take one more question from Sam?
Yes, well, I was wondering, these are really impressive tools, and what is your staff like to design, develop, and then maintain the servers and the software and the maintenance that goes into all these tools?
Well, so I do two things. In the university, I have a bunch of professors and graduate students and research associates who sort of work on these tools and develop them and so on and so forth. But also we have an army of developers. In the IT board, the Punjab IT board, I have about 100 developers who keep this running. But also, made massive investments in setting up tier 4 data centers and in data analysis appliances and so on and so forth. So there's huge investment that's gone to the infrastructure, in HR quality that we've been able to recruit to maintain and upgrade and design and implement these platforms, but also some fairly high quality professors who've really looked at these problems done well. This platform that we designed was the speech analysis part comes from a recent PhD from CMU, from the speech analysis group. So there's a really top tier people who know what they're doing. So I think a combination of both is what has enabled us to do some of this.
Okay, I would like to thank Umar one more time, and I would like to invite everybody to join us for a reception in the Allen Center immediately.